She just wanted to work in peace, but she was humiliated for being poor until an unexpected voice changed everything. She was there, kneeling on the cold floor behind the counter, choking back tears she could no longer control. Her hands were trembling, stained with spilled coffee and shattered dreams. The words still burned in her ears, sharp and merciless. Maybe if you knew how to dress, someone would take you seriously. In that moment, she felt worthless. She was about to give up on everything, but what she didn't know was that at that very moment someone was watching her in silence, ready to change everything, someone who had the power to rewrite her destiny forever. What would you do if you could completely change someone's life with just one action? Stay with me until the end of this story, because today you'll discover the true power of empathy. Her name was Rachel, and life had never given her anything easily. She grew up in a house where silence screamed louder than any words. Her mother, consumed by depression, suddenly disappeared. No letters, no goodbyes. Her father, a man, too broken to love, drowned himself in alcohol as if it were the only way to keep breathing. Rachel was only 8 years old when she realized she was on her own from that point forward. Childhood became a luxury she never got to know. While other girls played with dolls, Rachel collected cans, washed neighbors' clothes, and learned to hide her tears so she wouldn't look weak. At 14, she started working as a cleaner in people's homes. Some treated her like she was invisible, others like she was a burden. But none of them knew that the girls scrubbing their bathrooms dreamed of becoming a nurse one day. She wanted to take care of people the way no one had ever taken care of her. At 17, she left home to escape an environment where love always came with yelling. She rented a small room in the back of an old house. The ceiling leaked, the mattress was hard, but for the first time she could lock the door and breathe in peace. By 23, she worked as a server in a busy downtown cafe. She woke up before sunrise every day, took 2 packed buses, and stood for hours with a smile, even when her body begged for rest. Her uniform was tight and worn out, her shoes so old they let in the rain. She tied her hair in the same bun every day, not for style, but because it was practical and hid the fact that she hadn't been able to buy decent shampoo in weeks. Still, Rachel carried a quiet strength, a dignity that held on, even when the world kept pointing out only her flaws. She wasn't perfect, but she was honest, hard-working, and she deserved to be seen. But in that cafe, all she ever got in return was coldness. That morning had already started off wrong. The alarm didn't go off. Or maybe it did, but Rachel was so exhausted she didn't hear it. She had slept less than 4 hours. After a night spent doing laundry and trying to sort through overdue bills, water, electricity, rent, everything past due, everything crashing down all at once. Outside, the sky was already grey. The first bus didn't stop. The second one was packed. Still, she got on, squeezed between tired strangers, clutching an old backpack that barely closed. She stood for nearly an hour, sweat dripping down her back, her legs shaky under the weight of fatigue. It felt like the world kept whispering, "You don't belong anywhere." When she arrived at the cafe, her uniform was wrinkled, her face pale, her feet already begging for rest. No time to breathe. A co-worker hadn't shown up, and the place was packed. Mark, the manager, stood with, arms crossed, eyes sharp like knives. Mark wore his name tag like it was a crown. He treated customers with fake charm and employees with clinical coldness, but what made him truly unbearable was the twisted joy he seemed to get from control. He didn't just manage, he dominated, and he loved it. Rachel had been his favorite target from day one. She'd noticed the sneers, the snide comments, the fake smiles laced with poison. Maybe it was her quiet nature, or her plain clothes, or maybe he sensed that she'd never fight back, and she didn't. because Rachel needed that job. More than the paycheck, it was her last lifeline in a storm that never stopped. Moments after arriving, a cup slipped from her tired hands. The rush, the sweat, the pressure, everything working against her. Mark pounced, accused her of turning the cafe into a disaster, his voice slicing through the room like a fire alarm. Rachel rushed to grab a towel, but the humiliation kept coming. Mark raised his voice, mocking her in front of everyone. He criticized the fragile look on her face, sneered that she acted like coming to work was doing them a favor. "This is a cafe, not a shelter," he spat. Each word landed like a punch. Silence fell. No one looked at her. No one said a word. Rachel knew that silence well. The silence of people who feel shame but choose to look away. The silence of fear and complicity. Her hands trembled, the cloth slipped, her eyes burned, her head stayed down, trying to shield herself from the flames of humiliation. Then Mark crossed the line. "Have you even looked in a mirror?" he said. "Maybe if you knew how to dress, someone would take you seriously." He mocked her clothes, saying they looked like they came from some forgotten thrift store. This time, there were laughs, low, awkward, but loud enough to hurt. Rachel stopped, lowered her head even more. She felt the heat of tears pushing to escape. But she told herself, not here, not in front of them, not in front of him. She pretended to reach for something behind the counter and knelt down. The floor was cold, but inside, everything was burning. Every word from Mark joined the long line of wounds she'd carried. The childhood criticisms, her mother's absence, her father's screams, the judgmental stares from people she'd worked for, the compliments that were just rejection in disguise. This wasn't about a spilled cup. It was her entire existence being dismissed. Right there, in front of eyes that refused to see her, she crouched between sugar bags and napkin boxes. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. The tears finally fell, quietly. And in that moment, Rachel truly believed. She wasn't meant for anything. What she didn't know was that someone had just walked through the door. While Rachel stayed hidden behind the counter, struggling to hold herself together, the world around her kept moving, like nothing had happened, and to most people there, nothing had. Her public humiliation was just another invisible detail. In the rhythm of that cafe, a place where customer smiles were fake, and managers' shouts blended with the grinding espresso machine. But for Rachel, this morning had already left deep scars. Her eyes were shut tight, fighting back tears. Her fingers trembled, her stomach twisted with nausea, and the metallic taste of shame clung to her tongue. Mark's voice echoed in her head. Each word a carefully aimed arrow. Her looks, her clothes, like he'd been saving those insults for just the right moment. And for Mark, the right moment was always when Rachel stumbled. Even the smallest mistake was his green light. That day, it was just a dropped cup. But for her, it shattered something deeper. She wasn't looking for a rag behind the counter. She was looking for a place to disappear. A corner where she could exist without being torn apart. Sitting on her heels, tucked away between boxes, Rachel thought maybe this was it. Maybe it was time to quit, to give up on everything. And then the door opened. The bell made a faint sound, almost lost beneath the noise. No one turned, too busy pretending not to notice anything. But the man who walked in was not just anyone. Tall, with slightly wavy brown hair and a short beard, he wore a dark overcoat soaked from the light rain outside. His eyes, calm, sharp, observant, scanned the room with quiet precision. His name was Ethan Walker, CEO of Walker Coffee Corp., a name seen in contracts, commercials, and industry awards. But today, he was just another silent customer, with a gaze that missed nothing, Ethan had a habit of visiting stores anonymously. He believed the true culture of a company revealed itself when no one knew they were being watched. He hadn't even planned to stop at this location. The rain forced him to take shelter and grab a quick espresso. What he found was not a coffee, it was a wake-up call. He sensed the tension the moment he walked in. Too quiet for a busy morning. Staff tense, customers awkward, and behind. The counter, something deeply unsettling. He saw her, Rachel, or rather the outline of her, curled up behind the counter, shoulders shaking, face hidden. He saw Mark too, laughing with another barista like he'd just delivered the joke of the year. Then he heard it. A comment about Rachel's clothes, comparing her to someone from a thrift store in the 1950s. That was enough. The tone, the mockery, the arrogance, all packed into one sentence. Ethan's expression hardened. He stepped up to the counter. Mark, not even looking up, muttered that someone would be right with him. Ethan replied calmly, asking for a simple espresso. Mark prepared it, handed it over without eye contact and started to walk away. But then Ethan asked, "Are you the manager here?" Mark turned back. "Yeah. Is there a problem?" Ethan said, "Not yet, but there might be." Mark blinked, assumed. He was dealing with a difficult customer, forced a smile. Walked off. Ethan stood near the bar, watching Rachel, still kneeling, still trying to disappear. Then, gently, he walked closer. He bent slightly, voice soft. "Are you okay?" Rachel slowly stood. Her eyes were still wet, her face red. She tried to smile. Couldn't. She nodded barely. Ethan didn't push. He pulled a card from his coat pocket and placed it on the counter. Ethan Walker, CEO, Walker Coffee Corp. Rachel's eyes widened. She didn't fully understand. Ethan said, "Please come to the main office tomorrow, 10 a.m. We have a lot to talk about." She nodded, stunned, unsure if any of this was even real. He gave her a small nod and walked. Out the same door he came through. From afar, Mark watched, saw Rachel holding the card. He walked over, trying to sound casual. "Who was that?" Rachel handed him the card. Mark read the name and turned pale. Ethan Walker, the man he answered to, the owner, and he'd seen everything. Mark froze, legs weak, cold sweat running down his back. He tried to play it cool, told Rachel she could go home early, that she looked tired, that maybe she should rest, but his voice no longer held authority. It sounded like fear. Rachel said nothing. She tucked the card into her pocket, grabbed her bag, and walked out. But inside her, something shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope. On the bus, she clutched the card like it was gold, reading it again and again, trying to believe this was really happening. Across town, Ethan dried his face, changed out of his wet coat, picked up the phone. "Tanya," he said to his assistant, "schedule a meeting for tomorrow at 10. Her name is Rachel, Central Branch. Also, get me the full file on the manager, everything we have." He hung up, walked to the window, watched the rain trace lines down the glass, and thought, it's time to change things, because there are people out there carrying the weight of the world, and no one ever sees them. Rachel arrived at the main office building with her heart racing and her palms sweaty. She wore her best clothes, still simple, but clean and carefully pressed. Her hair, tied in a neat ponytail, trembled with every uncertain step. As she walked through the reception, she didn't know what to do with her hands. She felt like someone walking through a world that was never made for her. But that day, something was about to be different. She was greeted politely and led to a quiet, bright and welcoming meeting room. The atmosphere felt completely different from anything she had ever known. Within minutes, Ethan walked in. No overcoat. He wore a simple outfit, a kind smile, and steady eyes. He sat across from her calmly, and for the first time, someone seemed truly interested in hearing what she had to say. He didn't start with promises or rehearsed speeches. He simply asked her one question: how she was doing. Rachel hesitated. For a moment she didn't know what to say, but somehow the words began to come out. She spoke about crowded buses, sleepless nights, the pile of overdue bills, the repeated outfits, the constant fear of failure. She shared how invisible she felt, and how she believed that hard grey life was all she'd ever have. Ethan listened in silence. He didn't interrupt, and in that silence there was more empathy than in 1,000 scripted phrases. When she finished, he said firmly that she deserved so much more. At that moment, Rachel had to swallow hard, because for the first time, someone didn't see her as a mistake to be fixed, but as someone who already had value, even before anything changed. Then he got straight to the point. He offered her a spot in the company's internal training program. The position came with better pay, fairer hours, and access to courses funded by the company. But that wasn't all. Ethan made it clear there was a bigger plan. He explained that he wanted her to train with the leadership team. He said she had exactly what the company was looking for: resilience, empathy, and the will to grow. The only thing she'd lacked until then was someone who believed in her potential. Rachel didn't know whether to smile or cry, so she did both at the same time. That afternoon, she left the building with a signed contract and a new badge in her pocket. But among all the papers and promises, there was something far more valuable inside: dignity. Something she had never carried with such weight and pride before. Days later, Mark was called in for an unexpected meeting. He tried to explain, tried to deny, even tried to manipulate the situation, but there were cameras, there were witnesses, and there was Ethan's gaze, steady, cold, and disappointed. Mark was dismissed from the company immediately. No farewell, no ceremony, just the sound of a door closing behind him. Soon after, the organization internally announced the implementation of new conduct and wellness guidelines. Rachel was invited to join the committee responsible for this new chapter. The girl who once hid behind the counter, curled between boxes and napkins, was now helping to shape a more humane and just environment. But the biggest transformation didn't happen in her position or her paycheck. It happened within. Rachel began to walk with straighter shoulders, her head held higher, and her gaze, the one that once begged not to be noticed, now carried something rare and powerful: self-respect. She still took 2 buses, still wore simple clothes, but she no longer needed to hide, because finally, she knew who she was. And perhaps more important than that, she knew she was no longer alone. Rachel didn't change the world, but she changed her own destiny, and that is already a revolution, because sometimes all a person really needs is to be seen, not with pity, but with respect. The truth is, there are thousands of women like Rachel out there, people who fight every single day just to survive, who carry invisible scars and forced smiles, who stay silent because they believe they have no choice. But there is a choice. This story is about empathy, about what happens when someone with power decides to listen, and also about what can happen when an ordinary person refuses to give up. Rachel wasn't saved. She always had strength, but in that moment, someone finally recognized the value she already carried, even if the whole world tried to erase it. And now, one question becomes impossible to ignore. How many Rachels have gone unnoticed around us? How many lives could change with just one small act of attention? If this story touched your heart, don't stay silent, share it, comment, talk about it. Because maybe the next turning point in someone's life is hidden in a simple action, and that action could start right now.